The morning sun cast long shadows across the Colorado wilderness as 17-year-old Maya Chen adjusted her heavy backpack and checked her compass one final time. She stood at the edge of the Rocky Mountain National Park Ranger Station, surrounded by 8 seasoned park rangers who looked like they could wrestle bears with their bare hands. Their weathered faces told stories of countless rescues, dangerous wildlife encounters, and brutal mountain conditions that would break most people. Maya felt their eyes on her, measuring, judging, doubting. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed barely 120 pounds. Her long black hair was tied back in a practical bun, and her hiking boots looked brand new compared to the scuffed, battle-tested gear worn by the men around her. She had been accepted into the elite search and rescue training program after scoring perfect marks on all the written exams and physical fitness tests. But standing here now, facing these mountain veterans, she wondered if book smarts and gym workouts would be enough. Listen up, rookies, barked Chief Ranger Tom Morrison, a barrel-chested man with salt and pepper beard and arms like tree trunks. His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent 25 years pulling people out of impossible situations. This is not summer camp. This is not a nature walk. This is life and death training that will push you beyond anything you think you can handle. The other trainees nodded seriously. There were 12 of them total, but Maya was the only woman and by far the youngest. The others were mostly military veterans, former firefighters, and experienced outdoorsmen who had spent years preparing for this moment. It looked like action movie heroes. Maya looked like she should be studying for her SATs. Morrison continued his speech, pacing back and forth like a drill sergeant. We lose an average of 15 hikers per year in this section of the Rockies. They get lost, injured, trapped by weather, or worse. When someone's life hangs in the balance, we don't have time for hesitation, fear, or weakness. Every second counts. Every decision matters. One mistake can mean the difference between bringing someone home alive or carrying out a body. Maya's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. She had dreamed of this opportunity since she was 12 years old, when her family had gotten lost during a camping trip and was rescued by park rangers. The memory of their professionalism, skill, and courage had inspired her to train relentlessly for 5 years. She had studied wilderness survival, emergency medicine, and search techniques. She had hiked thousands of miles, climbed dozens of peaks, and spent every summer volunteering with local rescue groups. But none of that seemed to matter now, surrounded by men who clearly thought she didn't belong here. Your first exercise, Morrison announced, is a basic navigation and endurance test. You'll hike to Eagles Peak, establish a temporary camp, and return by sunset tomorrow. That's 28 miles of some of the most challenging terrain in North America. The elevation gain is over 4,000 feet. The weather forecast shows possible thunderstorms this afternoon and tonight. He pointed to a topographic map posted on the wall behind him. You'll work in pairs. Your partner assignments are already posted. Remember, this is not a race. It's about demonstrating competence, judgment, and the ability to work as a team under pressure. Half of you will not make it through this program. Some of you won't make it through today. Maya found her name on the assignment list and felt her heart sink. She was paired with Jake Torres, a former Marine who had made it clear during orientation that he thought women had no business in search and rescue work. Jake was built like a linebacker with massive shoulders, thick arms, and the kind of intense stare that made people uncomfortable. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and spoke about his military experience with the casual confidence of someone who had faced real danger. Jake approached her with obvious reluctance. "Look, kid," he said, not bothering to hide his irritation. "I don't know what strings you pulled to get into this program, but I'm not going to babysit you. If you can't keep up, I'm leaving you behind." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I didn't pull any strings. I earned my place here just like everyone else. And I won't need babysitting." Jake snorted. "We'll see about that. Just try not to get us both killed." The other rangers gathered around Morrison for final instructions while Maya double-checked her gear. She had spent months researching and assembling her equipment. Her backpack contained everything needed for wilderness survival: water purification tablets, emergency shelter, first aid supplies, high-energy food, extra clothing, and navigation tools. Everything was organized and accessible. She had practiced packing and unpacking her gear dozens of times until she could find anything she needed in complete darkness. Despite her preparation, Maya could hear whispered conversations among the other trainees. Words like liability and affirmative action drifted her way. She knew they were talking about her, questioning whether she deserved to be here. The doubt in their voices stung more than she wanted to admit. At exactly 8 in the morning, Morrison blew his whistle, and the exercise began. The 12 trainees set off in 6 pairs, each taking a different route to the same destination. Maya and Jake started up the Glacier Gorge Trail, a steep path that wound through dense forest before emerging above the tree line. For the first hour, Maya had no trouble keeping pace with Jake's aggressive hiking speed. Her years of training had given her strong legs and excellent cardiovascular fitness. But Jake seemed determined to test her limits. He set a punishing pace, taking long strides that forced Maya to work harder to keep up. When the trail became steep and rocky, he didn't slow down or offer assistance navigating difficult sections. Having trouble already? Jake called over his shoulder as Maya scrambled over a large boulder. Sweat was beginning to bead on her forehead, but she was nowhere near exhaustion. "I'm fine," Maya replied evenly. "Just watching my footing." The trail climbed steadily through magnificent scenery. Towering pine trees gave way to aspens with leaves that shimmered gold and green in the morning sunlight. Crystal clear streams cascaded down the mountainside, fed by snowmelt from peaks that remained white year-round. Under different circumstances, Maya would have stopped frequently to appreciate the beauty around her. But Jake showed no interest in the scenery, maintaining his relentless forward progress. As they gained elevation, the air became thinner and the temperature dropped noticeably. Maya adjusted her layers accordingly, adding a light jacket and switching to a warm hat. She noticed Jake was breathing harder now, though he tried to hide it. The military conditioning that served him well at sea level was being challenged by the reduced oxygen at altitude. After 3 hours of hiking, they reached the tree line at 11,000 feet. Above them, the landscape transformed into a harsh world of granite peaks, loose rock, and unpredictable weather. Clouds were beginning to build on the western horizon, suggesting the afternoon thunderstorms Morrison had predicted. Jake stopped for the first time since they started hiking. He pulled out a water bottle and drank deeply, trying to appear casual. But Maya could see he was more tired than expected. His face was flushed, and his breathing was labored despite his efforts to control it. "We should check our position," Maya suggested, pulling out her GPS device and topographic map, "and maybe adjust our route based on the weather conditions." Jake waved dismissively. "I know exactly where we are, and I'm not changing plans because of a few clouds." Maya studied the map carefully. According to her calculations, they were making good time, but would need to cross an exposed ridge system to reach Eagles Peak. If thunderstorms developed while they were on that ridge, they would be in serious danger from lightning strikes. The smart move would be to take a longer but safer route through the valley. "Jake, I think we should consider the alternate route," Maya said, pointing to the map. "The ridge crossing puts us at risk if those storms move in faster than predicted." Jake barely glanced at the map. "Look, rookie, I've been reading maps since before you could walk. We're taking the direct route. I didn't come here to waste time wandering around valleys because you're scared of a little weather." Maya felt frustration building, but kept her voice calm. "It's not about being scared. It's about risk assessment and making smart decisions." That's what Morrison emphasized during the briefing. Morrison emphasized not being weak. Jake shot back. "Real rangers take calculated risks. They don't run away from challenging conditions." Maya wanted to argue further, but recognized it would be pointless. Jake had clearly made up his mind, and she didn't have enough experience or authority to override his decision. She folded her map and adjusted her backpack straps. If they were going to take the dangerous route, she would make sure she was prepared for anything that might happen. They continued climbing toward the ridge, following a faint trail marked by occasional cairns. The terrain became increasingly challenging, requiring careful foot placement on loose rock and steep slopes. Maya found herself naturally taking the lead, choosing the safest path and testing handholds before committing her full weight. Her smaller size actually became an advantage here, allowing her to move more efficiently across technical terrain. Jake struggled more than he expected on the technical sections. His bulk, which served him well in straightforward hiking, became a liability when precise movement was required. He knocked loose several rocks that clattered dangerously down the slope below them. Maya had to dodge quickly to avoid being hit by falling debris. "Watch your footing," Maya called up to him. "Loose rock is dangerous for both of us." Jake ignored her warning and continued climbing aggressively. His pride wouldn't allow him to acknowledge that the teenage girl below him was demonstrating better mountain skills. But Maya could see he was becoming frustrated with the technical demands of the route. The clouds on the western horizon had grown dramatically larger and darker in the past hour. Maya estimated they had maybe 2 hours before the storms reached their position. If they maintained their current pace, they would be crossing the most exposed section of ridge right when the weather turned dangerous. At the base of the final approach to the ridge, Maya tried one more time to reason with Jake. "Those clouds are developing faster than forecast. We're going to be in the danger zone right when the storms hit. We should turn back and take the valley route." Jake was breathing hard and clearly annoyed. "Stop being so paranoid. A little rain never killed anyone. Besides, we're almost there. Turning back now would be quitting." Maya realized she was facing an impossible situation. Jake was her assigned partner, and protocol required them to stay together. But his stubborn refusal to acknowledge the growing danger was putting both their lives at risk. She had to choose between following orders and following her instincts. As they began the final climb to the ridge, Maya noticed the first signs of electrical activity in the approaching storm system. The hair on her arms began to stand up, and she could smell the distinctive metallic scent that preceded lightning strikes. Every survival instinct she had developed over years of mountain training screamed at her to get off the exposed ridge immediately. But Jake was already 20 feet ahead, determined to prove he could handle any challenge the mountains threw at him. Maya watched him climb higher into danger and realized she was about to face the first real test of her judgment and courage as a future ranger. The decision she made in the next few minutes would define not only her career, but possibly whether both of them survived the day. The storm was coming whether Jake acknowledged it or not. And Maya was about to discover just how much she was willing to risk to keep them both alive. The first rumble of thunder echoed across the peaks as Maya made her decision. Jake was 50 feet ahead now, climbing steadily toward the most exposed section of the ridge. The metallic taste in the air had grown stronger, and Maya could feel static electricity building in her hair despite the cool mountain breeze. She had perhaps 10 minutes before the lightning reached their position. "Jake," she called out as loudly as she dared. "We need to get off this ridge right now." He turned back with obvious irritation. "Would you stop being such a baby? It's just thunder. We'll be across the ridge and setting up camp before any real weather hits." Maya pulled out her weather radio and checked the latest forecast update. Her blood ran cold as she heard the revised prediction. Severe thunderstorm warning with frequent lightning, hail up to golf ball size, and wind gusts exceeding 70 miles per hour. The storm system was moving twice as fast as originally forecast and would reach their position within 30 minutes. "Jake, listen to this," Maya shouted, holding up the radio. But he had already turned away and was climbing higher. Maya faced the hardest decision of her young life. Every ranger protocol she had studied emphasized staying with your partner. Never separate. Never leave someone behind. But those same protocols also emphasized that unnecessary risks could turn rescuers into victims. Following Jake up that ridge in these conditions would likely get them both killed. She made a choice that went against every instinct about teamwork and partnership. Instead of following Jake higher, Maya began looking for immediate shelter. About 30 yards to her right, she spotted a shallow cave formed by an overhanging granite slab. It wasn't perfect protection, but it would shield them from the worst of the storm. "Jake," she yelled again. "There's shelter over here. Come back down." This time he stopped climbing and looked back at her. "What are you doing? The summit is right there. I'm trying to save our lives." Maya called back. "Look at those clouds. We have maybe 5 minutes before this ridge becomes a lightning rod." Jake studied the approaching storm for the first time since they had started climbing. Maya could see his expression change as he finally grasped the severity of the situation. The massive thunderheads now towered 30,000 feet into the sky, and electrical activity was visible as bright flashes within the clouds. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. "I've been through worse than this in Afghanistan. A little mountain storm doesn't scare me." Maya watched in horror as Jake continued climbing toward the ridge crest. She realized he was so focused on proving himself that he couldn't think clearly about the danger. His military training had taught him to push through adversity and never quit, but mountain weather required different judgment. Sometimes retreat was the only intelligent option. The wind suddenly picked up dramatically, carrying the sharp smell of ozone and the first scattered raindrops. Maya could hear a low humming sound that experienced mountaineers recognized as a warning sign of imminent lightning strikes. She had seconds to act. Making a decision that violated every protocol she had been taught, Maya dropped her heavy pack and began climbing rapidly toward Jake. If she couldn't convince him to come down, she would have to physically drag him to safety. Her smaller size and lighter weight allowed her to move quickly across the technical terrain. "Jake, I'm not leaving you up here," she shouted as she closed the distance between them. "But we're both getting off this ridge right now." Jake had reached the crest and was standing triumphantly on the exposed summit, arms raised in victory. He looked like a conqueror, silhouetted against the dark storm clouds. But Maya could see his hair standing on end from static electricity, and she knew they were both about to die if she didn't act immediately. The first lightning bolt struck a peak about half a mile away, the crack of thunder following instantly. The storm was directly overhead. Maya reached Jake just as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. His face had gone pale, and his eyes were wide with sudden understanding. "We need to move," he said quietly, all his bravado gone. "Follow me," Maya replied, grabbing his arm. "Stay low, move fast, and don't argue." She led them both down from the ridge as quickly as safety allowed, choosing each step carefully on the now slippery rock. The rain had increased to a steady downpour, making every surface treacherous. Thunder crashed around them with increasing frequency, and Maya could smell the distinctive burnt ozone scent of nearby lightning strikes. They reached Maya's pack just as the storm hit with full force. Hail began falling, starting with small pellets that stung when they hit exposed skin. Within minutes, the hailstones had grown to marble size and were falling with enough force to bruise. The cave. Maya pointed toward the overhanging rock formation she had spotted earlier. They ran across 30 yards of exposed ground while marble-sized ice pellets hammered them from above. Maya felt several hailstones hit her helmet and shoulders, the impacts jarring even through her protective gear. They dove into the shallow cave just as the hail reached golf ball size. The sound of ice striking the granite around them was deafening, like being inside a giant drum. Through the opening of their shelter, Maya could see hailstones bouncing violently off the rocks where they had been standing just minutes before. "Jesus," Jake whispered, staring at the violence of the storm. "That would have killed us." Maya was checking her gear to make sure nothing had been damaged during their hasty retreat. Her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline, but her voice was steady. "The storm should pass in about an hour. Then we can assess our options and continue to the objective." Jake looked at her with new respect. "How did you know? I mean, how did you read the weather so accurately when I completely missed it?" Maya pulled out her weather radio and topographic map. I've been monitoring conditions every 30 minutes since we started. The forecast kept getting worse, and the visual signs were all there. The cloud development, the wind patterns, the electrical buildup. You were so focused on the summit that you weren't paying attention to the environment. A massive lightning bolt struck the ridge crest where Jake had been standing triumphantly just 10 minutes earlier. The thunder was instantaneous and so loud it seemed to shake the mountain itself. Both of them flinched at the proximity of the strike. "That would have been us," Jake said quietly. Maya nodded but didn't say anything. She understood that Jake was processing not just the physical danger they had narrowly escaped, but the realization that his judgment had been catastrophically wrong. For someone with military experience and natural leadership instincts, admitting error was difficult. They sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the storm rage outside their shelter. The hail gradually decreased in intensity, but the lightning remained frequent and dangerously close. Maya used the time to study her maps and plan their next moves. "Our original timeline is shot," she said, pointing to their position on the topographic map. "But we can still reach the objective if we modify our route. The valley approach will take 3 hours longer, but it keeps us away from exposed ridges." Jake studied the map over her shoulder. "You really think we can make up the time? If we hike efficiently and don't make any more mistakes," Maya replied diplomatically. Jake was quiet for a long moment. "I screwed up," he finally said. "I let pride override good judgment. In combat, that kind of thinking gets people killed." Maya looked at him with understanding. Mountain conditions are different from anything else. The weather can change from perfect to deadly in minutes. Even experienced climbers get caught off guard sometimes. "But you didn't," Jake pointed out. "You read the situation correctly and made the right call. I should have listened to you instead of dismissing your concerns." The storm was beginning to move past their position, the thunder growing more distant and the lightning less frequent. Maya could see patches of blue sky starting to appear through breaks in the clouds. In another 20 minutes, they would be able to continue safely. "We need to talk about how we're going to work together for the rest of this exercise," Maya said carefully. "And the rest of the program, if we both make it through." Jake nodded. "You're right. I came into this thinking I knew everything I needed to know. But I obviously have a lot to learn about mountain rescue work." Maya appreciated his honesty, but she also knew that one moment of humility didn't necessarily mean permanent change. Jake was accustomed to being the most competent person in any situation. Learning to defer to someone with better judgment, especially someone he had initially dismissed, would be an ongoing challenge. "What's your background in mountaineering?" Jake asked. Maya gave him a brief overview of her training and experience. She had started rock climbing at age 12 and progressed to technical mountaineering by 15. She had climbed peaks throughout the Rockies, Cascades, and Sierra Nevada. She had completed wilderness first aid certification, avalanche safety courses, and technical rescue training. Her academic record included straight A's in subjects ranging from meteorology to emergency medicine. Jake listened without interrupting, his expression growing more thoughtful. "So you've been preparing for this specifically for 5 years?" "Longer, really. I decided I wanted to be a park ranger when I was 12. Everything I've done since then has been building toward this goal. And I just assumed you were here because of some diversity program," Jake admitted. "That was ignorant and unfair." Maya had heard variations of that assumption many times before. "Most people make that assumption. I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be used to it," Jake replied. "And you shouldn't have to prove yourself more than anyone else." The rain had stopped completely, and sunshine was beginning to break through the dispersing clouds. Maya could see steam rising from the wet rocks as the mountain air cleared. It would be safe to continue in another few minutes. "So what's the plan?" Jake asked, studying the map again. Maya traced their modified route with her finger. "We descend into Glacier Valley, follow the creek upstream for about 4 miles, then take the north approach to Eagles Peak. It's longer, but much safer given the continuing storm potential." "How much longer?" "About 3 hours. But we'll make up some time on the descent because the trail is well maintained through the valley." Jake packed his gear efficiently, moving with the practiced economy of motion that came from military training. I'll follow your navigation from here on out. You've already demonstrated better mountain judgment than I have. Maya appreciated his willingness to adapt, but she also knew the real test would come when they faced their next challenge. Would Jake defer to her expertise when it really mattered, or would his natural leadership instincts override his current humility? They emerged from their shelter into brilliant sunshine that made the wet granite sparkle like diamonds. The air was crystal clear, washed clean by the storm, and the views of surrounding peaks were spectacular. But Maya remained focused on the immediate challenges ahead. As they began their descent toward the valley, Maya noticed Jake watching her movement across technical terrain with new attention. She had developed efficient techniques for navigating loose rock, stream crossings, and steep slopes. Her approach emphasized conservation of energy and minimizing risk rather than impressive displays of strength or speed. "You move well on this stuff," Jake observed as they descended a particularly tricky section of wet granite slabs. "Efficiency matters more than power in the mountains," Maya replied. "The goal is to cover distance safely, not to look impressive doing it." Jake was learning to appreciate the difference. His military background had emphasized aggressive forward movement and overwhelming obstacles through force and determination. Mountain travel required more subtle skills: reading terrain, conserving energy, adapting to conditions, and making smart decisions about when to push forward and when to retreat. They reached the valley floor in excellent time, despite the delay caused by the storm. Maya's route selection had been perfect, avoiding the most difficult terrain while maintaining steady progress toward their objective. The well-maintained trail through Glacier Valley allowed them to make up time, and Jake's superior conditioning became an advantage on the long, steady climbs. As they hiked through the beautiful valley, with its clear streams, wildflower meadows, and towering peaks, Maya began to relax slightly. They had survived their first major challenge and seemed to be developing a more effective partnership. Jake was listening to her technical advice and contributing his own strengths in endurance and navigation. But Maya knew the most difficult part of their journey still lay ahead. The north approach to Eagles Peak was technically challenging and would test every skill they possessed. And beyond this training exercise, she would face months of additional tests, evaluations, and challenges from people who doubted whether a 17-year-old woman belonged in the elite world of mountain rescue. The storm had been just the beginning. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Maya and Jake approached the base of Eagles Peak via the north route. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind perfect weather that made the morning's drama seem like a distant memory. But Maya knew that mountain conditions could change again without warning, and she continued monitoring weather updates every 30 minutes. They had made excellent time through Glacier Valley, covering the 4-mile approach in just under 2 hours. Jake's endurance training had proven valuable on the long, steady climbs, while Maya's route-finding skills had kept them on the most efficient path. They were actually ahead of their original schedule, despite the storm delay. "According to the map, we should reach the established campsite in about 2 hours," Maya said, checking their position with GPS and comparing it to the topographic features around them. "But the route gets technical from here on out." Jake studied the terrain ahead through his binoculars. The north face of Eagles Peak rose almost vertically for over 1,000 feet, broken by narrow ledges, loose rock sections, and several places where they would need to use their hands as well as their feet to make progress. It was classic Rocky Mountain alpine terrain that required both physical skill and mental toughness. "That looks like serious climbing," Jake observed. "Do we have enough rope if someone takes a fall?" Maya checked her gear list. "I've got 60 meters of dynamic rope, plus anchors, harnesses, and helmets. It's enough for the technical sections, but we'll need to move efficiently. The sun sets at 7:30, and we don't want to be climbing in the dark." They spent 15 minutes organizing their gear and reviewing their route one final time. Maya had studied photographs of the North Face during her preparation for the program and had memorized the key landmarks and potential hazards. Jake watched her methodical approach with growing respect. "You really have done your homework," he said. "Preparation is everything in the mountains," Maya replied. "The more you know going in, the better your chances of handling unexpected problems." They began the technical approach to Eagle's Peak at exactly 3 o'clock. The first section involved scrambling up loose rock that required careful foot placement and constant attention to handholds. Maya took the lead again, testing each hold before committing her weight and warning Jake about unstable rocks. Her movement style was deliberate and smooth, wasting no energy on unnecessary motion. She had learned through years of climbing experience that efficiency mattered more than speed on technical terrain. Jake followed her line exactly, beginning to trust her judgment about route selection. After an hour of steady climbing, they reached a prominent ledge system that provided their first real rest opportunity. Maya checked her GPS again and confirmed they were making good progress. The established campsite was still an hour away, but they were climbing faster than the conservative pace she had planned. "How are you feeling?" Maya asked, noticing that Jake was breathing heavily. "Good," Jake replied, though sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool mountain air. "This altitude is still kicking but a little." They were now above 12,000 feet, where the reduced oxygen made every physical effort more demanding. Maya had spent years training at altitude and was well adapted to the conditions, but Jake was feeling the effects of the thin air. "We can take a longer break if you need it," Maya suggested. Jake shook his head firmly. "I'm fine. Let's keep moving." Maya recognized the stubborn determination that had gotten Jake in trouble during the storm, but this time it seemed better controlled. He was pushing himself, but also listening to his body and monitoring his limits. She decided to trust his self-assessment while remaining alert for signs of altitude sickness. They continued climbing, following a narrow ledge that angled upward across the face of the mountain. The exposure was spectacular, with views stretching for hundreds of miles across the Colorado Rockies. But the ledge was also intimidating, with steep drop-offs on both sides and loose rock that shifted under their feet. Maya noticed Jake becoming more tense as the exposure increased. His movements became less fluid, and he gripped handholds more tightly than necessary. She realized he might be dealing with some fear of heights, which was not uncommon among people new to serious mountaineering. "Take your time," Maya said calmly. "Focus on one move at a time. Don't look down at the drop-offs." Jake nodded, but didn't say anything. Maya could see him working to control his breathing and stay focused on the immediate task. She remembered her own early experiences with exposed climbing, when every step felt like it might be her last. The fear was natural and could actually be helpful if it encouraged caution and careful movement. They reached the end of the ledge system without incident and found themselves at the base of the route's most technical section. According to Maya's research, this was a near-vertical wall about 60 feet high that required actual rock climbing skills rather than just scrambling. Most climbers roped up for this section. Maya studied the wall carefully, identifying the best line of ascent and the most solid handholds. The rock was generally good quality granite, but there were some loose sections that would need to be avoided. She also noted several potential anchor points where she could place protection if Jake needed the security of a rope. "I think we should rope up for this section," Maya said, pulling her climbing gear from her pack. Jake looked relieved. "That sounds like a good idea." Maya had brought a lightweight rack of climbing hardware, nuts, hexes, and camming devices that could be placed in cracks to provide anchor points. She had also packed a small selection of pitons for emergency use. The gear was compact, but comprehensive enough to handle the technical challenges of the route. She tied Jake into one end of the rope and secured the other end to her harness. "I'll lead this section," she said. "Follow my line exactly, and don't move until I'm anchored at the top." "Roger that," Jake replied, falling naturally into military communication patterns under stress. Maya began climbing the vertical section with the fluid grace that came from years of practice. She moved methodically, testing each hold and placing protection every 10 feet or so. Her placement of anchors was textbook perfect, each piece positioned to hold maximum force in the direction of a potential fall. Jake watched her climb with growing amazement. The teenager who had looked so out of place among the veteran rangers was demonstrating technical skills that surpassed anything he had seen before. Her movement was confident, precise, and beautiful to watch. "Climb when ready," Maya called down from the top of the wall, her voice carrying clearly in the thin mountain air. Jake began climbing, following Maya's route exactly. The holds she had chosen were positive and secure, making his ascent much easier than it would have been if he had tried to find his own way up the wall. He moved slowly but steadily, and Maya provided encouragement and route guidance from above. "Great job," Maya said as Jake pulled himself over the top of the wall. That was solid climbing for someone without extensive rock experience. Jake was breathing hard but grinning with accomplishment. "I can't believe I just did that. I've never climbed anything that steep before." "You did well," Maya replied honestly. "Good technique, smart pacing, and you stayed calm under pressure." They coiled the rope and reorganized their gear before continuing toward the established campsite. The sun was beginning to sink toward the western peaks, casting long shadows across the alpine terrain. Maya estimated they had about 90 minutes of good light remaining. The final approach to the campsite involved easier scrambling across broken rock and small cliff bands. Maya and Jake moved together efficiently, no longer needing to rope up, but still maintaining careful communication about route choices and potential hazards. They reached the designated camping area just as the sun began painting the surrounding peaks in shades of gold and orange. The campsite was a flat area about 20 feet square, sheltered from prevailing winds by a rock outcropping. Previous climbers had built a fire ring and left some emergency supplies in a weatherproof cache. "Perfect timing," Maya said, checking her watch. They had completed the technical approach to Eagle's Peak in exactly the time she had estimated, despite the morning's weather delay. Jake dropped his pack with visible relief. "I have to admit, I'm beat. That was harder than I expected." Maya began setting up her lightweight mountaineering tent while Jake organized their food and water supplies. They worked together smoothly now, each contributing their strengths to the shared tasks of establishing camp. "So what's the plan for tomorrow?" Jake asked as they prepared a simple dinner on Maya's compact stove. "We'll attempt the summit early in the morning," Maya explained, pulling out her map and headlamp. "The weather forecast is good, and we should be able to reach the top by noon. Then, we descend back to the ranger station via the standard route." Jake studied the map in the beam of her headlamp. "How technical is the summit route?" "Easier than what we did today," Maya replied. "It's mostly scrambling with a few sections of easy climbing. The main challenges are altitude and weather exposure." As darkness settled over the mountains, they sat by a small fire made from dead wood they found near the campsite. The temperature had dropped dramatically with sunset, and they pulled on warm layers to stay comfortable. Above them, the stars began appearing in incredible profusion, visible with a clarity impossible in populated areas. "I owe you an apology," Jake said quietly, staring into the flames. "Not just for this morning, but for how I treated you from the beginning of this program." Maya looked at him across the fire. "You don't need to apologize for being skeptical. A lot of people have doubts about whether I belong in this program. But I never gave you a chance to prove yourself," Jake continued. "I made assumptions based on your age and size without considering your actual qualifications and experience. That was wrong." Maya appreciated his honesty, though she had heard similar admissions before from people who initially doubted her capabilities. "The important thing is that we can work together effectively. That's what really matters for search and rescue work." "You saved my life today," Jake said bluntly. "If you hadn't forced me off that ridge, I'd probably be dead right now. And then you led us safely through some really technical terrain that I never would have managed on my own." Maya poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up into the star-filled sky. "We both contributed today. Your endurance and navigation skills were just as important as my weather reading and climbing experience." Jake was quiet for several minutes, processing the events of the day. I'm starting to understand why Morrison selected you for this program. You have judgment and technical skills that can't be taught in a classroom. I've been training for this my whole life, Maya replied. But I still have a lot to learn about working with partners and handling emergency situations. After today, I'd trust you to lead me anywhere in these mountains, Jake said seriously. You've earned my respect completely. Maya felt a warm glow of satisfaction at his words. But she also knew that earning Jake's respect was just the first of many challenges she would face. The other rangers, the program instructors, and the broader search and rescue community would all need to be convinced that a 17-year-old woman could handle the responsibilities of mountain rescue work. They spent another hour discussing their experiences, sharing stories about their respective backgrounds, and planning their summit attempt for the following morning. As the fire burned down to coals, they retreated to their sleeping bags for what they hoped would be a peaceful night's rest. But as Maya lay in her tent listening to the wind whistle around the peaks above them, she knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The summit of Eagles Peak was just the beginning of her journey to prove herself in a world that still questioned whether she truly belonged there. The mountains had tested her once today, and she had passed. But there would be many more tests ahead, each one potentially more demanding than the last. Maya drifted off to sleep, determined to meet whatever challenges awaited her with the same combination of preparation, skill, and courage that had gotten her this far. Maya woke at 4:30 in the morning to the sound of her watch alarm beeping softly in the darkness. The mountain air was brutally cold, and frost covered the outside of her tent despite the protection of her sleeping bag. She could hear Jake stirring in his own tent nearby, both of them following the alpine climber's rule of starting early to avoid afternoon weather. She checked her weather radio first thing, as had become her habit. The forecast remained favorable: clear skies, light winds, and temperatures warming to comfortable levels by midday. Perfect conditions for their summit attempt and descent back to the ranger station. "Jake, you awake?" Maya called quietly, not wanting to disturb the profound silence of the high mountain dawn. "Yeah," came his muffled reply. "Give me 5 minutes to get organized." Maya dressed efficiently inside her tent, pulling on warm layers that she could adjust as the day warmed up. Her routine was practiced and automatic after years of alpine starts. Base layers, insulating layers, waterproof shell, warm hat, and gloves. Everything organized so she could find it by feel in complete darkness. She emerged from her tent to find the world transformed by starlight and the first hints of dawn on the eastern horizon. The peaks around them stood like silent sentinels against the slowly lightening sky, their snow-covered summits glowing faintly pink in the pre-dawn light. The beauty was breathtaking, but Maya remained focused on the practical tasks of breaking camp and preparing for the summit push. Jake emerged from his tent looking tired but determined. "Man, that was a cold night," he said, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "It'll warm up once we start moving," Maya replied, packing her gear with practiced efficiency. "And the sun will be up in about an hour." They ate a quick breakfast of energy bars, hot coffee from Maya's camp stove, and plenty of water. Maya had calculated their fluid needs carefully, knowing that dehydration at altitude could lead to serious problems, including altitude sickness and impaired judgment. By 5:15, they were packed and ready to begin the final push to the summit of Eagles Peak. Maya studied the route one last time with her headlamp, identifying key landmarks and potential hazards. The summit was approximately 800 feet above their camp, accessible via a series of rock ledges and scrambling terrain. "The route goes up that obvious gully system," Maya explained, pointing with her headlamp beam. "Then we traverse left across those ledges and finish up the southeast ridge to the summit. It's straightforward navigation, but we need to watch for loose rock." Jake nodded, his respect for Maya's route-finding abilities now complete after yesterday's experiences. "How long do you think it'll take?" "About 3 hours up, 1 hour on the summit for the required tasks, then maybe 2 hours back to camp," Maya calculated. "We should be heading down to the ranger station by noon." They began climbing in the darkness, their headlamps creating pools of light on the rough granite. The initial gully was filled with loose rock that required careful foot placement, and they moved one at a time to avoid kicking stones down on each other. As they gained elevation, the first light of dawn began illuminating the peaks around them. Maya paused frequently to check their position and ensure they stayed on the correct route. Navigation in the pre-dawn darkness was challenging, but she had memorized the key features during her preparation for the exercise. By 6:30, the sun had risen above the eastern peaks and was beginning to warm the rock. Maya and Jake removed their heavy outer layers and adjusted their clothing for more comfortable climbing. The temperature differential between shadow and sunlight was dramatic at this altitude. "This is incredible," Jake said during one of their rest stops, looking out over the vast expanse of the Rocky Mountain wilderness. Peaks stretched to the horizon in every direction, most still covered with snow despite the late summer season. Maya followed his gaze across the magnificent landscape. "This is why I wanted to become a park ranger," she said, "to protect places like this and help people experience them safely." They continued climbing steadily, following Maya's planned route up the southeast ridge. The terrain was technical enough to require concentration, but not so difficult that they needed ropes. Jake's confidence on exposed rock had improved dramatically since yesterday's experiences. At 8 o'clock, they reached the final approach to the summit pyramid. Above them, the true summit of Eagles Peak rose another 200 feet through a series of steep rock steps and narrow ledges. Maya could see the summit register box mounted on a pole at the highest point. "Last push," Maya said, checking her energy levels and Jake's condition. "How are you feeling?" "Strong," Jake replied honestly. "The altitude is still noticeable, but I'm managing it better today." Maya had been monitoring Jake carefully for signs of altitude sickness throughout their ascent. His color remained good, his coordination was normal, and his judgment seemed clear. The gradual ascent over 2 days had allowed his body to adapt to the reduced oxygen levels. They began the final summit climb at a steady pace, moving together across technical terrain that required good communication and teamwork. Maya continued to lead on the most difficult sections, but Jake was contributing more to route-finding decisions and safety assessments. At exactly 9:15 in the morning, Maya and Jake pulled themselves onto the flat summit of Eagles Peak. The view was spectacular in every direction. The Continental Divide stretching north and south, the eastern plains visible as a brown haze in the distance, and dozens of 13 and 14,000-foot peaks rising all around them. "We did it," Jake said with a huge grin, the satisfaction obvious in his voice. Maya smiled back, feeling the deep contentment that came from achieving a goal through careful preparation and skillful execution. But she also knew their job was only half finished. Getting down safely was just as important as reaching the summit. She pulled out the summit register and signed both their names, noting the date, time, weather conditions, and route of ascent. The register contained signatures from dozens of previous climbers, including several of the senior park rangers who had completed the same training exercise in years past. "Morrison's signature is from 1998, Jake observed, reading through some of the entries. "He was probably about our age when he did this route." Maya photographed their position with a GPS unit to document their successful completion of the exercise objectives. She also took several pictures of Jake with the summit backdrop, knowing he would want proof of his accomplishment. After 30 minutes on the summit, Maya began organizing their gear for descent. "We need to start down," she said, checking her watch and the weather conditions. "I want to be back at camp by noon so we can pack up and start the hike out." The descent followed their ascent route for most of the way, but Maya chose several alternate sections where down climbing would be easier than retracing their exact upward path. Her route finding continued to impress Jake, who was beginning to understand the complexity of safe mountain navigation. They reached their camp at exactly noon, having descended the 800 feet of technical terrain in just over 2 hours. Maya's time estimates had been accurate to within 15 minutes throughout the entire exercise. "I'm starting to think you have some kind of internal chronometer," Jake joked as they quickly broke camp and packed their gear for the hike out. Experience, Maya replied simply. After you've done enough climbs, you develop a sense for how long things take under different conditions. They began the descent toward the ranger station at 12:30, following the standard route that most climbers used for Eagles Peak. This path was longer than their approach route, but much easier, involving mostly hiking on established trails rather than technical climbing. Maya set a steady pace that would get them back to the ranger station by late afternoon without exhausting them unnecessarily. She continued to monitor weather conditions and Jake's physical condition, maintaining the same careful attention to safety that had characterized their entire trip. As they descended through different elevation zones, the landscape changed dramatically around them. The harsh alpine environment near the summit gave way to lush meadows filled with wildflowers, then dense forests of pine and aspen. The diversity of ecosystems within just a few thousand feet of elevation gain fascinated Maya every time she experienced it. So what happens when we get back? Jake asked as they hiked through a particularly beautiful meadow dotted with purple lupins and red Indian paintbrush. We report to Morrison for debriefing, Maya replied. He'll want details about our navigation, decision-making, teamwork, and any problems we encountered. Jake was quiet for several minutes. Are you going to mention that I almost got us both killed yesterday morning? Maya had been thinking about the same question. I think I have to mention the weather situation and how we handled it. But I'll emphasize that we worked together effectively to solve the problem. Even though I was the problem, Maya looked at him as they continued hiking. Everyone makes mistakes in the mountains. The important thing is learning from them and not repeating them. Morrison will probably be more interested in how we recovered from the situation than in the fact that it happened. They reached the tree line at 2:30 and continued descending through magnificent alpine forest. The well-maintained trail allowed them to make excellent time, and Maya began to relax as they approached familiar territory near the ranger station. Looks like we're among the first groups back. Maya felt a flutter of nervousness as they approached the debriefing area. She had successfully completed the technical challenges of the exercise, but now she faced the equally important challenge of demonstrating that she could analyze and communicate her experiences effectively. Morrison looked up as Maya and Jake approached. Chun, Torres, he acknowledged with a nod. Successful summit? Yes, sir, Maya replied, handing him the GPS documentation of their climb. We reached the summit at 9:15 this morning and completed all the required objectives. Morrison studied their route data and timing information. Tell me about your experience. Major challenges, decisions, points, lessons learned. Maya gave a concise but thorough summary of their 2-day exercise, emphasizing their teamwork, problem-solving, and safety management. She described the weather situation they had encountered on the first day, but focused on how they had worked together to reach a safe resolution. Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on his clipboard. His expression remained neutral throughout Maya's presentation, giving no indication of his assessment of their performance. Torres, anything to add? Morrison asked when Maya finished. Jake looked at Maya briefly, then back at Morrison. Chin demonstrated exceptional judgment and technical skills throughout the exercise. Her weather assessment yesterday probably saved our lives, and her route finding and climbing abilities made the difference between success and failure. Morrison made additional notes, but still showed no emotion. Any significant problems or conflicts? No, sir, Jake replied firmly. We worked well together as a team. Morrison studied them both for a long moment. All right, get your gear cleaned and organized. We'll have a group debrief with all the training pairs at 1800 hours. As they walked toward the equipment storage area, Jake turned to Maya. Thanks for not throwing me under the bus back there. Maya shrugged. Like I said, everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is that we both learned something and completed the mission successfully. But as Maya cleaned and organized her climbing gear, she wondered what Morrison really thought about their performance. Had she proven herself capable of handling the responsibilities of mountain rescue work? Or were there still doubts about whether a 17-year-old woman belonged in this elite program? She would find out soon enough during the group debriefing session. For now, she was satisfied that she had met every challenge the mountains had thrown at her, and had begun earning the respect of at least one skeptical partner. The real test of her future as a park ranger was just beginning.